Zafer sinemasında 2 film birden. Başrollerinde sinemanın bebek yüzlü aktörü Tarık Akan ve güzel gözlü yıldız Perihan Savaş. Esir Hayat. Kıbrıs'ta çekilen bu film aşk, mücadele, heyecan dolu. Kadınlara meccanen. Duyduk duymadık demeyin. Esir Hayat Zafer sinemasında.
Yakın Doğu Üniversitesi İletişim Araştırmaları Merkezi tarafından düzenlenen 2. Uluslararası Sinema Sempozyumu 8-11 Mart 2022 tarihlerinde gerçekleştiriliyor.
Eğer ki hayatımızda hiç eğer olmasaydı nasıl olurdu? Size şöyle söyleyeyim. Her şey daha az parlak, daha az yeşil olurdu ve daha az parlak yeşil. Çünkü eğerler ormanların derinliklerinde tek bir kibritle derinlerin kıvılcımını ateşler. Eğerler Nobel ve Guggenheim'ın aklına takılır ve o kodu bu kodu çözerler. Eğerlerle içinizden haykırmak gelir. Eğerler bariyerleri kırarlar. Asla yalnız yürümezler ve aşırı bulaşıcıdırlar. Eğerler aşikardır ve son anda golü atarlar. Eğerler dünü umursamazlar. Robotlarla bile konuşabilirler. Karşı takım soluklanırken oynamaya durmadan devam ederler. Sadece basit bir kelime öyle mi? Hayır. Eğerler asla uyumazlar. Hep daha fazla çaba gösterirler. Eğerler bakar, araştırır ve en beklenmedik zamanda ortaya çıkarlar. Eğerler klonlanarak çoğalırlar. Acaba gerçekten yapabilir misin? Yaptın bile. Eğerler aklınıza girmeye çalışan güler yüzlü şakacılardır. Eğerler kapıları açarlar. Asla kaybetmeyeceklerini bilirler. Ve biraz gün ışığına her zaman hazırdırlar. Her şey bir eğerle başlar. Çünkü eğerler ne zamana dönüşür, ne zamanlarsa şimdi. Ve şimdi nasıla dönüşür. Nasılsa asıl. Eğerler bakış açınızı değiştirir. Eğerler oyunu değiştirir. Eğerler dünyayı değiştirir. Biliyoruz. Çünkü biz eğerlerle çalışıyoruz. Yakın Doğu Üniversitesi.
Herkese merhabalar. İkinci Uluslararası Sinema Sempozyumunda birlikteyiz. Ben Kerem Kaban. Konuğumuz olacak Profesör Mariusz GRZEGORZEK. Biraz sonra onunla Polonya'dan canlı bağlanacağız. Bize sinema da yeni ve sinema ne? Sinemada yeni ve yeni ne kavramı üzerinden bir konuşma gerçekleştirecek. Hello, Professor.
Hello. Hello.
Thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much. It's, for your invitation, for having me. It's really a pleasure to meet you today. It's a pity though that it's via internet online, but it's good that we have at least such a possibility.
Not problem. I want to see you for a long time. I hope everything is all right.
Yes, all right. The situation in Poland is quite tense now because of the, Ukrainian-Russian war, but we are trying, to be brave and to survive somehow.
Okay. I will share a short information about you. Okay.
Okay, please.
Hem Türkçe yapacağım hem de İngilizce. Önce bir Mariusz Hoca'dan bahsetmek istiyorum çalışmalarında. Professor Mariusz GRZEGORZEK, film, theater and television director, screenwriter, set designer and graphic artist, film producer. graduated from the directing department of the Polish National Film, Television and Theater School in Łódź, and since 1989 a lecturer and an artistic supervisor of many students' films there. In 2012, he was elected for the rector of the Łódź Film School. The artist has received many international awards for his short and feature films, and he has also worked as an author of music and documentary films. GRZEGORZEK's wide range of musical interest also includes television production of classic music concerts as well as music video clips. He created a graphic design of concerts including various phases of Chopin performed in China. As a theater director associated mainly with the Yarach Theater in Łódź, in which he created several performances, many times awarded with Golden Mask for the best staging of the theatrical season. For many years, together with the psychotherapist Wojciech Ahelberger, he has produced TV series Windows and The Night Watchman, focusing on the problems of human spirituality. One of his great passions is computer graphics and design. He has been author of many posters and publications for theaters in Poland. Professor, a member of both the Polish and the European Film Academy, a long expert of the Film Institute. Film, tiyatro ve televizyon yönetmeninin olmasının yanı sıra set tasarımcısı, grafik sanatçısı ve aynı zamanda senaristtir. Lost'taki Polonya'daki Ulusal Film Okulu ve Televizyon ve Tiyatro Okulu'nda yönetmenlik bölümü mezunu olan GRZEGORZEK, aynı zamanda kurumda 1989 yılından beri öğretim görevlisi olarak bulunmuş. Bunun yanı sıra öğrenci filmlerinin sanatsal süpervizörü olarak da danışmanlık yapmıştır. 2012 yılında Lost Film Okulu'nun rektörü olarak göreve getirilmiştir. Çok sayıda uluslararası film ödülleri bulunan sanatçı aynı zamanda müzik yazarlığı ve belgesel yönetmenliğini de icra etmiştir. GRZEGORZEK geniş müzik ilgi alanı olan televizyon yapımlarını, klasik müzik konserlerini ve popüler müzik videolarını içerir yaptığı işlerde. Çin'de icra edilen Various Phases of Chopin isimli performans gibi konserlerin de grafik tasarım ögelerini içeren bölümlerini yapmıştır. Daha çok Lost'ta yer alan Yarach Tiyatrosu'nda yönetmen olarak çalışmış ve çalışmalarıyla birçok kez dönemin en iyi sahneleme konusunda Golden Mask ödülüne layık görülmüştür. Birçok yıl da uzun sürelerdir de psikoterapist Wojciech Ahelberger ile birlikte Pencereler ve Gece Bekçisi Windows and Night Watchman isimli insan tinselliğinin problemlerine odaklanan televizyon dizisinin yapımcılığını üstlenmiştir. Tutkularından birisi ise bilgisayar grafiği ve tasarımdır özellikle. Polonya'daki tiyatrolardan çıkan birçok basılı yayın ve posterlerin tasarımcısı olarak da kendisi bulunmuştur. Aynı zamanda Polonya ve Avrupa Film Akademisi'nin kurumlarında ikisinin de üyesidir ve aynı zamanda uzun süredir de Polonya Film Enstitüsü'nün danışmanlığını yürütmektedir. Since I got to know the professor, his positiveness towards life, creative work in the field of arts and emotional awareness has been a guiding light to me.
Oh, thank you very much. You are
I would like to thank him for this. It was an honor for me to work with him.
Oh, dear Mr. Kerem Kaban, it's really, too much for me. But, I appreciate you and your positive attitude as well very much. And when you ask me, to take a part in this symposium, I didn't hesitate even 1 second. So thank you very much once more for the invitation. And I would like, to say thank you very much.
Now, I leave the stage for Professor, please.
Okay, so it's time for me now, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much once more for having me. As I understand, the topic we should talk about, proposed by Mr. Kerem Kaban today, which is cinema new, what is new, is a very interesting topic, but at the same time complex, very wide, very multi-layered. It can be analyzed from many, maybe even too many different points of views. I'm not an expert in the broadly understood media. I'm a primarily director and teacher. And based on my experiences, I would like to say a few words to you, share my observations, which are, very personal, very subjective, and honestly, don't need to be taken too seriously. So remember about it. Mr. Kerem Kaban, thought about my, positive attitude towards life, but unfortunately, I'm afraid that my today's speech will be in a little bit darker mode. So forgive me, but the time is quite complicated. In my today's speech, I would like to address three main following topics. The first one is the question, do we live in a time, a moment in the development of civilization which favors art and artistic searches, including cinematic searches, which is, I think, very, very serious but very important topic. The second one is, do such important and common technological innovations in our life and film industry, because we live in the era of very dynamic technological changes, yes, have a real impact on the development of a new means of expression in film and film art. As I told you, I'm not a media expert, so I decided to focus on the film. And the third, maybe most important topic I would like to share with you today is, I call it generational change. I mean, how to teach new generations of filmmakers. And for me, this topic, is very close to my heart, and I think it's very close to your hearts, obviously. And of course, at any time, if you would like to ask, any questions or would like to present your point of view, I will take part in such a conversation with pleasure and curiosity. At the beginning, let's talk for a moment about the concept of progress. I mean, the constant novelties on a quite literal, very obvious level, which we are all aware of, which is extremely important. That is technological progress. It sounds quite, technical, but I think it's extremely important for, more deep and more, for the last 80 years, probably, the constant civilization and technological progress we experienced seemed to be the only possible direction of development. The increasing prosperity and the amazing progress of technical thought developed by the powerful techno corporations has led us to complete change of our world. It also influenced enormously the development of digital technologies and the possibility of recording video and sound, making our world a civilization of moving images, which is obvious, I think. I'm not a sociologist or a political scientist, so let me tell you for a moment about my personal experiences. I mean, experiences of a 60-year-old man who started his dream of being a film director as a teenager in 1970s, studies in the film school in 1980s, and tries, to keep up with the new film technological possibilities in the 1990s. In the 80s of the last century, making films in Poland was for a young people associated practically only with studying at the film school. It was absolutely obvious if you want to make films, because only this institution has technical facilities for 35 millimeters negative film, which was then, the only strictly limited form of shooting short films at school. We work under the supervision of master professors, and shoot almost entirely on 35mm film. Such productions were very expensive. We received a very limited amount of film negative. It was West Germany production film negative called Orwo. And we approach our work with, how to call it, great enthusiasm, even devout concentration. Of course, this situation generated, there's a limited amount of film stock, yes, it generated extraordinary stress. During shooting, we could often afford 1 or 2 takes at most in a given take. And it was a source of a great stress for us, which often dominated our work, the film set, and had an almost paralyzing destructive force, because all the time you have to think about the very limited amount of film negative you have to use. But video recording in the 80s, the video recording and magnetic tape was the object of general contempt at our school. We had some very expensive TV cameras in TV studio that nobody wanted to work on, because we wanted to avoid poor quality video, which we all despised. At the time, there were no computers at all. Editing the image was the video image was very, very tedious process, and the final effect left a lot to be desired. However, at the beginning of the 90s, the explosion and development of digital and computer technologies stunned us with the avalanche of technological progress. And in just a few decades, it made breathtaking technical changes or even a technological revolution. New camcorders and cameras, smaller and smaller and smaller and more comfortable, with ever greater resolutions of recording the quality of image and sound. From poor standard resolution from the 80s, very low quality, we lamped to high resolution. You know this very well. Yes, 2K, 4K, 6.8, 8K. Sky is the limit. The second, the new breathtaking non-linear editing and post-production capabilities, thanks to computer technology. Then new possibilities of special effects, CGI computer-generated imagery, which had huge possibilities that they are able to generate everything, from spectacular spaceships and monsters in science fiction movies to realistic objects and landscapes in historical movies. Today, on a green screen in the studio, you can shoot almost anything without leaving the studio. But the most important, more impressive to us, and at the same time, I think maybe the most disturbing and dangerous exemplification of the incredible technological and cultural revolution we have gone through is this device. A smartphone, the phone that is smart. We have them in our pockets, on the table, by the bed, all the day and night, yes. Our children and grandchildren do not leave them even for a moment. They cannot live without them. I am talking about it as a threat, something dangerous. But from the point of view of every independent filmmaker, it should be a real treasure, a holy grail, a source of incredible, freely available film shooting opportunities. The latest smartphones have several lenses. They can record in professional formats, for example, Apple ProRes. You can make precise film editing and color correction on them without using external devices. Is it a technological revolution? For sure it is. In the last few decades, have we witnessed constant technical innovations, amazing development of image recording tools? Yes, without a shadow of a doubt. There are generally available, cheap, ways of making films, which should be a harbinger, of another much more important artistic revolution, not technical, but artistic revolution, a revolution of liberation from the age-old struggle to make a film, to finance its expensive production, a hard and exhausting fight which we all know from our own experience and which has defeated many talented but insufficiently resilient artists. It might seem the times of artistic freedom have come, yes, in which talent and creative energy, as well as the search of the new means of expression, can find a field to show off, unhampered by production limitations. But is that what happened? This is one of my main questions, yes. I wouldn't like to generalize, I rather speak for myself, but it seems to me that not entirely. The art of film, and more specifically young filmmakers, in my opinion, did not take advantage of this opportunity. There has been no widespread eruption of artistically valuable new directions in the cinema, low-budget films made thanks to the wide availability of cheap film tools. Thanks to this, making a film for the first time in history could become a personal act. It's very important, a personal act. It can be an intimate thing, such as a painting a picture or writing a novel. Now you can professionally edit, sound, and prepare for distribution even a full-length feature film at home using your own computer. However, this fascinating accessibility, the democratization of film technologies, did not initiate, in my opinion, in my modest opinion, the outbreak of a new independent cinema. Cheap, convenient forms of recording have become a rather powerful production tools for social media. Countless authors publishing video podcasts, better or worse, short films, and extremely wide range of topics from culinary to sports to the so-called lifestyle on the platforms like YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook, Instagram, or the recently popular TikTok, yes? As we know, social media authors produce unimaginable amounts of short content that completely changed our approach to interpreting the world and perceiving moving images. There are a powerful, fascinating, and in my opinion, extremely toxic method of communicating through moving images. You probably know what I am talking about. This is a huge topic having little to do with high-quality art film. Professional filmmakers are surprisingly reserved about these generally available new tools. My question is, have you heard about any feature, valuable film, shot on iPhone or a cheap camcorder that would achieve artistic success and some wider publicity? Yes, of course, there are a few exceptions, like, for example, film Unsane by Steven Soderbergh or Sean Baker's Tangerine, both made on smartphones, proving that you can make quality, serious cinema using cheap, widely available tools. But they really are exceptions. They prove the rule. I am amazed how many of us prefer to fight the often devastating battle for so-called professional, multi-million budget for the film project for years, rather than try much easier and more natural, in a bit guerrilla-style model of a modest, low-budget production. As is known, the development of art, including film art, just like the progress of science or civilization in general, develops according to a certain amplitude. Its highest excursions are marked by a strong dynamics, a flourishing of creativity, openness to artistic courage, searching for new forms of expression. Art then becomes an extremely important element of reality, very, very important, a tool of social dialogue, making the world a better, fairer, and more spiritual place. I'm afraid that the last 40 years is the period during which the amplitude has reached its lower point. I try to be positive, but it's hard to shake off the impression that our development now is stagnant, in state of intellectual crisis and moral ambivalence. Paradoxically, science, and above all, computer technology, achieve an amazing acceleration. It is said that currently so many important discoveries and technological improvements are made within 2 years that it would take 20 or 30 years to make them several dozen years ago, in 80s or 90s of last century. Scientists, sociologists, and political scientists notice amazing changes in the development of societies. Until recently, each generation lived in a stable socio-political context. Changes and progress took place from generation to generation. Today, such a crazy technological progress with a radical change in the way and style of our life and the means of social communication influencing our lives, we realize that a man will have to be able to adapt to several complete civilization and cultural changes during his life. In other words, what we have experienced, what we have learned about life and the way of social communication as children and young people may turn out to be useless or out of date when we reach middle age. It's terrifying, very difficult for many, and even impossible for many. This amazing and frightening civilization and technological development is accompanied, in my opinion, by the stagnation of art, and film art in particular. As we know, cinema, so-called the 10th muse, was born as a popular art, made to delight of viewers. Over the decades, it has evolved, and apart from popular cinema, other trends have slowly emerged, searching, deep, bold, and serious, which have slowly established the position of cinema as a full-fledged part of high art, so-called artes liberales. Each of us carries in his heart and head the names of great directors who awakened his love for cinema, made the movies our passion, the way of contact with a fascinating form of storytelling about the world around us. They built an intellectual and spiritual community. Those films asked important questions and helped us provide our own answers. How is it today? Unfortunately, it seems to me that it is bad, even very bad. Of course, there are interesting, powerful films around us without any doubts. The problem, however, is that ambitious, searching art of cinema has been pushed aside. It has no chance of reaching a wider audience. It can be said that I'm dealing with a kind of systemic exclusion, a kind of censorship, which closes the way for serious, searching artists to pursue important topics. Let me tell you very, very briefly about the situation on the Polish film market, because Polish film industry, I think, is quite representative for many smaller European cinematographies. Polish Film Institute, the national institution operating for many years at the Ministry of Culture and Art, Polish Ministry of Culture and Art, organized, like many other European institutions supporting ambitious film art, has slowly changed its priorities. Initially focused on supporting ambitious artistic projects, they has been financing more and more popular box office orientated films for several years. These are often very secondary projects, romantic comedies or criminal films based on especially American schemes, patterns. Abandoned by a state financing, ambitious directors of both the older and, worst of all, the younger generation found it very difficult to find money for any more ambitious films. TV stations are not interested in them, nor are streaming platforms operating in our country, such as HBO or Canal Plus. An amazing, in my opinion, example of a lack of goodwill and responsibility for shaping the taste of its viewer is shown by Netflix. I watch with horror how the vast majority of their production are completely irrelevant, unsuccessful in terms of scenarios and implementation, really bad projects. Film series without life and meaningless, stretched to the limit of endurance, repeating the same well-known patterns over and over again, films that hide a lack of creativity, human and artistic emptiness under their very glossy packaging. They are unsuccessful even in their category of light pop entertainment cinema. They are dead and boring, focused on blunt telling and predictable stories. And watching them makes me frustrated and exhausted rather than a feeling of relaxation or fun or whatever. So I can risk a statement that the situation of film art in our country and probably also in the world is in deep crisis. In my opinion, this amplitude I was talking about swung all the way down. Of course, there is a space for so-called art house cinema, artistic festivals and film meetings. The problem, however, is that the space of distribution and circulation of the artistic cinema is shrinking at an really alarming rate. It is available almost exclusively to a small group of enthusiasts relegated to the ghetto of elite and supposedly unnecessary art. To see a good movie, you have to be very determined and spend a lot of time searching for a repertoire. Isn't Netflix easier to turn on? I'm sorry that I'm talking so much about the crisis, about the fact that what is new, brave, seeking the truth in our world is somehow suppressed, yes, pushed to the margins. Let me now move to another, I think, difficult but very important issue for all us teachers in art school or art departments, cinema departments, media departments all over the world. How to teach and how to treat students, I mean young filmmakers, in the face of such a huge crisis of so-called high art, such poor-looking prospects, perspectives, hopes. I have been teaching film directing at the film school in Łódź for over 30 years. I work with very small, usually 9 to 12 person groups of both Polish and foreign students like Italy, Mexico, China, India, Scandinavian countries. My classes begin with analysis of existing films and are devoted to various aspects of film directing, such as dramaturgical structure, mise en scène, its types and functions, dramaturgy of the film image, sound and music in the movie, methods of working with actors, and so on and so on. On to the next stage, these classes organically go to work on students' own diploma fiction projects. We work on it strictly from the stage of initial idea to the development of the script, mise en scène, cast, then post-production stages like editing and sound post-production after the shooting period, and so on. This very strict and relatively long mode of work with students allow me to carefully and probably reliably observe their interest and artistic attitudes. My observations and conclusions rhyme in an interesting and at the same time somehow a disturbing way with the topic of my speech. When we talk today about cinema, This is our topic, yes, cinema, new in cinema. By definition, we try to analyze the progress and the development. We want to be a rising curve, not falling curve. As all my listeners today know very well, working with young artists on their school films is a very responsible, sensitive, and difficult task. I have always taken my students very seriously, honestly, even maybe too seriously. Studying directing at our school is not easy. It requires diligence, regularity, and most importantly, attempts to answer the question. Very important, in my opinion, question like, who am I? How do I recognize myself? Why am I doing films? What I would like to talk to my viewer about? What style and type of film language to use in this conversation? Of course, we teach the basics, we teach the craft, the basic tools of filmmaking, but in our process, there are only a platform on which an original, personal, and at the same time clear and communicative film statement is constructed. Such a method of working on a project requires mutual uncompromisingness, courage, insight, touching delicate, even intimate spheres in the learning process, reaching out to one's own traumas and weaknesses, which often constitute a more or less conscious source of inspiration. I have always tried to be an older, more experienced partner for my students than an omniscient master who preaches wisdom and gives an apparent sense of security. For many, many years, this method, this cultural code we communicate to each other and value system were very clear to both sides, me and my students, and brought interesting results that were very satisfactory for everybody. However, over time, I began to notice with anxiety that something was changing. For me, the attitude of young people, young artists, and young filmmakers has always been a synonym of curiosity about the world, a tendency to rebel, and artistic and life searches. My attitude to them and to the phenomenon of learning while studying at the film school was always in some sense idealistic or even romantic. I have always believed that the development of the film craft and film skills is something extremely important, but more important is the development of personality, the search for a human and artistic self, your own artistic style. This attitude is quite risky because sometimes, of course, you have really great results. I believe that the basics of the film, the craft, this, the foundation, can be learned in 1 year studies at the Lodz Film School, but the last 5 films, because, studying in our school is about 5 years, yes? So it's quite, long time. So we have to much more time for developing the personality, a meeting that is mind open and involves the mutual energy at substantive exchange. Not only can students learn from me, but I can also learn from my student. For me, it's obvious. But now, very important thing, because however, for 7-8 years, I noticed that many students have more and more trouble with this type of very personal and very direct relationship. More and more often, I come into contact with withdrawn people who would like to learn only the technique and objective tools at school, as if in isolation from conversation about what kind of artist they would like to be and what kind of cinema they dream of. People who are in a sense fearful and avoiding any substantive confrontation. often treating each critical remark as a kind of a personal attack on them. Their value as a future artist, they seem to be lonely, atomized people, not feeling the need for verbal communication, having problem with the identification in a group and the sense of community, often completely focused on an objective professional career, which means making commercials or film series for streaming platforms, which I talk about earlier in my speech. Students who have so far been deprived of the element of curiosity about the world and people, rebellion, and the will to change the status quo, so clearly associated with the phenomenon of youth and spiritual maturation. The socio-political situation in the world, as well as the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, only strengthened the feeling of alienation and the lack of professional prospects. From my point of view, the transfer of meetings and lectures to the online zone, to the online, like we communicate today, yes, was one of the most difficult teaching experiences for us, deepening the sense of pointlessness and total ineffectiveness of such form of communication in art school. Maybe on universities it's quite different. In art school it was really a nightmare. It is not difficult to guess that the situation I have described is not a source of enthusiasm. In this context, is it possible to expect a flourishing of new talents? People not only talented and creative, but also having the energy and strength to infect others, to cooperate with. After all, film, like no other kind of art, is associated with a team effort. It's clear. Is there a chance for some new trends and invigorating movements of thoughts, expressive, world-changing films or art in general? As a teacher and somebody who desperately needs hope, I answer, I think yes. While my picture of reality seems pessimistic and devoid of constructive energy, it really is not. I see very interesting artistic potential in many of my students. However, it took me really some time to come to the conclusion that in front of our eyes, the approach, the way of teaching young artists is drastically changing. In my opinion, they require much more mental care, careful listening and acceptance. The relationship built on the principle that a young filmmaker must know exactly what he wants, must be able to sell himself, because this is the reality of the industry. Yes, this idea slowly ceases to work because young people have a problem with assertiveness and going outside with their ideas. Therefore, they need to be think longer and more carefully in the teacher-student relationship, creating a sense of well-understood security. We must help them in bold and precise articulation of their intentions, more forcefully enforce the methodology and discipline of work, destroyed by the flood of dopamine in the brain. I have a feeling that the film teacher must be now a much more sensitive and attentive psychologist than an uncompromising partner exposing the students to the hard emotional and substantive training. However, this new attitude should not change our priorities. It's very important. Priorities are maybe the most important. In this crazy world that blurs meaning and turns value upside down, we should remember about the spiritual foundations. I think that the one of our fundamental rights and obligations is the ability to make a proper diagnosis, understanding that we are dealing with a new generation of young people, sometimes called by sociologists Generation Z, which perceives the world and human relation in a completely different way than it was 10 years ago. Atrophy of values, disorientation, disturbed sense of security, escapism, extreme individualism, narcissism are just some of the obstacles we have to face. In addition, there is a lack of trust in authorities. I mean, lack of trust in professors, for example, programmatic nihilism, and problems with work discipline. Therefore, when asked what kind of new trends or challenges await us, teacher, in film teaching, I would answer in a contradictory and perhaps disappointing way for many of you. It is necessary not to search for something new, but to defend the eternal fundamental values that constitutes the soul and heart and the driving force of art and the world. Constructing vigilant, responsible communication between the author and the viewer based on the awareness of a deeper meaning, asking important questions, curiosity about the world and people, in order to tell the eternal stories of love, hatred, crime, and punishment in a way that will touch people's heart, therapize traumas, and rebuild basic social bonds. Perhaps you will call my postulates utopian and unrealistic, but the fulfillment of dreams and deeply understood human duties lie at the basis of any properly understood teaching pedagogy. It is necessary to wisely, delicately, and yet effectively warm the hearts and minds of these young, often lost, manipulated, and confused people. Then they will become a new generation of artists for whom film art will become an important tool of dialogue with us, with the reality that surrounds us, in order to change it for better. New, often revolutionary technical tools are waiting for us on our doorstep. It's really, something unusual. Perhaps on a technical level, film art will soon become a completely new multi-dimensional spatial medium into which we will immerse ourselves as if into actual world. But the new one these new tools will remain just an empty figure, a vehicle of advertising, pornography, and an ocean of dumb stories. If we do not stand together with our youth on the guard of universal, real-world values and meanings, I have the impression that the war is not only fought in Ukraine now. The war for the meaning of life and human dignity continues everywhere, and we are taking very modest but very important part in it, whether we want it. I'm very sorry if my statement and my speech was a little bit too general. At the end, maybe a little bit too pathetic, but that's how I feel. So, thank you very much for your time and attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for sharing your valuable information with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Şimdi kısa bir Türkçe özetini hocamız, Yakın Doğu Üniversitesi'nden bir hocamız bize yapacak. Genel konu başlıklarıyla. Davetli Hoca. Hocam size zahmet olacak, böyle bir özet yapacak. Biraz da teknik konulardan da girdi Mariusz Hoca. Ama sonuçta siz bir özet geçersiniz en azından.
Evet, ben çok kısa olarak değindiği ana hatlara biraz onları aktarmaya çalışayım Türkçe takip eden seyircilerimiz için. Konuşmasının başında öncelikle sinemanın da yeninin ne olduğu konusunun aslında çok karmaşık ve çok boyutlu bir şekilde ele alınması gerektiğinden bahsetti ve bunu 3 farklı ana konu çerçevesinde değerlendirdi bizler için. İçinde yaşadığımız dönemde hayatımızdaki gelişmelerin sanatı ve sanatçıyı ne kadar önceliyor? Bu soru üzerine durdu ve bu sorudan yola çıkarak film endüstrisinin sanatçının kendisini ifade etmesi noktasında biraz ekonomi politik alanına da girerek bu iki konuyu birlikte ele aldıktan sonra yeni jenerasyon film yapımcısı olmak için eğitim alan öğrencilere aslında eğitimin, bu film sanatı eğitiminin nasıl verilmesi, nasıl aktarılması gerektiğine değindi. İlk iki konuda özellikle altını çizdiği noktalardan bir tanesi, hani akıllı telefonlarla hayatımıza giren bu işte kendi film yapımcılığına başladığı zamanlarda işte 35 milimetre filmle, negatifle uğraşırkenki problemlerin ötesinde ne kadar aslında her şeyin çok kolay olduğunu şu anda cebimize girdiğini, kayıt yapma imkanlarının, montaj yapma imkanlarının masamızın üzerinde durduğundan bahsetti. Bunun bir muhteşem bir gelişme olup olmadığı noktasını sorguladı. Bir taraftan öyleyken öteki taraftan da aslında bu alanın yeni nesil tarafından özellikle sosyal medyada kısa içerikler üretmek bağlamında kullanıldığı için aslında sanatsal yapımlardan ziyade işte böyle sosyal medyada dolaşacak minik içeriklerin üretilmesine yönelik bir duruma dönüşmüş olduğunu bahsederken zehirlenme kelimesinin, film sanatının bu anlamda zehirleniyor olduğuna dikkat çekti. Tabii işte Sean Baker'ın Mandalina filmi gibi istisnalar bulunsa da maalesef genellikle film sanatının bundan kötü bir şekilde etkilendiğine işaret etti. Polonya'dan örnek verdi. Polonya'da şu anda sinemanın ne durumda olduğunu ve işte romantik komedi, suç filmleri gibi ikinci sınıf filmler olarak nitelediği sanatsal yapımlar, sanatsal bir anlayıştan uzak yapımların çok daha fazla finansal destek aldığını, korku içinde takip ettiğinden bahsetti. Buradan da yola çıkarak aslında hani kendi öğrencilerini veyahut da film okullarında öğrencilerin nasıl aslında bir eğitime tabi tutulmaları gerektiğinden bahsetti. Dramaturjik yapının analizinin, işte mizansenin incelenmesinin, sanatsal yaklaşımların ele alınmasının gerekliliğine işaret etti. Fakat bunların da ötesinde aslında hani bunlar teorik anlamda ve pratik anlamda incelenip analiz edilebilir. Öncelikle öğrencilerin ben kimim, nasıl bir film dili, neden bana uygundur sorularını sorgulayabilir ve bu soruların cevabı üzerinden bir şeyler üretebilir bireyler haline gelmesi için yapılması gerekenler olduğuna işaret etti. Bunların en başında da aslında eğitimcilerin şu andaki neslin nasıl bir yaşantı içerisinde olduğu, sosyal, ekonomik anlamda nasıl bir çerçeve içerisinde yaşadıklarının bilinciyle aslında onlara yaklaşılması gerektiğinin altını çizdi. Bu anlamda da bir taraftan çok olaylara kötümser baktığını sürekli söylüyordu ama işte insanlık itibarının korunması ve film sanatının da geliştirilmesi adına yeni neslin anlaşıldığı bir noktadan onlara film sanatının, dramatolojinin öğretilmesi gerektiğini, bunun da aslında bireyin kendini tanımasından ve hangi sosyal problemlerin onu nasıl etkilediğini anlamasından, birey olarak anlamasından geçtiğini ve bunun film okullarında mümkün olduğunu belirtti. Bu şekilde özetleyebilirim.
Ben de ufak bir katkı bulunayım. Mariusz Hoca'yı da ben uzun süredir tanıdığım için onun aslında bu bize protest gibi olan bir bakışı aslında yani yaşam alanına veya mesleğe olan saygısından kaynaklanan bir şey. Böyle çok progresif ve protest gibi gözükse de aslında o iyinin, güzelin ve daha çok üretimin peşinde olan bir hocamız. O yüzden de hakikaten böyle hani eskide kal böyle kafası değil aslında tamamen sinema sanatının nasıl yapılması ya da sanatın nasıl üretilmesinin gerçek anlamda üretilmesinin hep kaygılarını güdüyor. Bizim yaptığımız daha önceki İzmir'deki atölyelerde de çocukları bu yönde tavsiye verdi. yani tavsiye veriyor. Yani bir şey motomot ısrar etmiyor. En büyük özelliklerinden biri bu. Bu anlamda da ben ondan hakikaten büyük keyif alıyorum bulunmaktan, çalışmalarından, birlikte çalıştığımız o dönem içerisinden. Bana cidden büyük bir yol gösterici ve bilgileriyle beni yeni baştan düşünmeye zorlayıcı bir yapısı olduğunda Mariusz Hoca'nın belirtmek istiyorum. Açılış için evet, şimdi Fevzi Hoca diyor ki Türk sinemasını tanıyor mu? Şöyle tanıyor. Yanlış hatırlamıyorsam Uç Film Okulu'nda şimdi bir kazada rahmetli olmuştu. Seyfi Teoman'dı galiba. Seyfi Teoman tarafından biraz biliyor. Çünkü onun öğrencisi olmuştu Uç'ta. Yani Seyfi Teoman öğrencisi olmuştu Mariusz Hoca'nın ama yani çok fazla bilmiyor. Yani tahminimce ama yeni nesil Türk sinemasında yani zannetmiyorum yani fazla ama bence yani sormak gerekir diye düşünüyorum. Öyle bir soru hiç sormadım ben bugüne kadar Mariusz Hoca'ya, bilmiyorum. İşte isterseniz Davetli Hoca da şey yapabilir, yani sorabilir. Varsa soru, bilmiyorum konuyla ilgili.
Şu an görebildiğim kadarıyla Fevzi hocamızın Türk sinemasıyla ilgili, hani Türk sinemasını tanıyorum, biliyorum veya dünya sinemasında nereye konumlandırır diye bir sorusu var.
Evet.
İletebiliriz hocamıza bu soruyu.
Hoca yayında mı, gitti mi bilmiyorum.
Evet, onu ben de.
Burada, evet. Siz sorabilirsiniz hocam, Davetli Hocam. Buyurun.
Hello, Professor.
Hello.
GRZEGORZEK. One of our professors here, Fevzi Kasap, has a question for you. He's wondering if you're aware of the Turkish cinema, and if you are, how you were situated within the world cinema.
Of course, my knowledge about the Turkish cinema is as easy, to guess, somehow concentrated about those, famous international art house, directors, like, for example, I don't know, Nuri Bilge Ceylan or Ferzan Özpetek, yes, or Fatih Akin. I mean, their films were widely internationally recognized, and honestly, for us, I mean, in Europe, yes, the only the film festivals, yes, and the very very limited distribution in so-called art cinemas. It was the only chance to see these films. But we appreciate, this, of course, this part. I don't know. It's not possible, to put them together to the one group. But I mean, generally, very, how to call it, very awakened, very, very deep film directors, very, the kind of the very competitive, yes, I mean the complementation kind of the cinema. I admired very much, yes, and of course I know that. But honestly, the contact with the Turkish cinema now is somehow in our country, how to call it, broken, yes. I mean that there is no many, or if any Turkish cinema we have a possibility to see, in Poland on the screens, which we regret very much. Yes, I regret. I'm talking about my feelings, yes, and about my recognition.
Evet hocam, Fevzi hocam, Nuri Bilge Ceylan, Ferzan Özpetek gibi zaten isimleri duymuşsunuzdur. Uluslararası tanınmışlığa sahip yönetmenler aracılığıyla ancak Türk sinemasını bildiğinden bahsetti.
Başka bir sorusu olan var mı Mariusz Hoca'ya? Onun da çünkü vakti de biraz kısıtlı olduğu için, tahmin ettiğimden dolayı isterseniz bir soru daha alıp şey yapabiliriz, toparlayabiliriz. Yok herhalde, değil mi? David hocam var mı sizin bir sorunuz bilmiyorum ama.
But on the side, I would like to tell that we have, surprisingly for us, we have quite, decent amount of Turkish students in our school, even now, yes. Especially, the cinematography department is quite popular, and we have, I think, 3 or 4 people from Turkey studying in our school. I have also a student now on my 4th year course. I have a student from Turkey.
Şu sıralarda şu anda kendisinin görev yaptığı okulda birkaç tane Türk öğrenci olduğundan bahsetti. Bu hani güzel bir gelişme bizim için.
Yo, hep oluyor hocam.
Evet, siz de oradaydınız. Öyle değil mi hocam?
Evet, oluyor. Ya ben konuk olarak katılmıştım ama yani hep orada bir Türk öğrenci alıyorlar. Böyle bir Polonya, Türk dostluğu çok o konuda. Hı hı. Son bir soru var. Fevzi Hoca'nın, isterseniz David Hoca onu da soralım ve toparlayabiliriz diye düşünüyorum.
Again, we have another question. This is something you've actually talked about in your speech a little bit. Do you think that the digital platforms, film platforms, is a way for young cinema filmmakers, film artists to get to be known to the world? Do you feel like those platforms are serving this purpose?
No, it's quite a tricky question. Yes, of course, the answer number 1 is yes, of course, yes, because it's a very powerful tool of communication and the distribution. Yes, and as I told in my speech, I think that the most important thing we are working on in Poland, for example, is how to somehow change the attitude of the people who decide what kind of projects are accepted and to production, because the main problem, as I told, is that the people who rule the Netflix, for example, they have very strict criteria, very low quality criteria, and the problem is that we would like to somehow to force them or to convince them to give a chance for more ambitious, low budget, for example, because it's a very important criteria for them, I think, not to spend a lot of money. Films who will be kind of the platform, something in between this very very pop and very popular production they did, and something more ambitious, because especially young film directors with their projects are completely lost. The only gate to open for them is to do what the Netflix or HBO or other streaming media propose them. I mean, the previously accepted low quality scripts, screenplays, projects with the external producers. They don't know just to make a product, yes, just to make something they want to. But we think in our school that one of the very important power and possibility is to working with the teams of the friends. Yes, during the the study in our school, the kind of artistic teams like director, cinematographer, and young producer, or young editor. Yes, it aroused, and it's very important and very powerful team. So we would like and dream very much not to separate them after the school, but to let them the possibility to work together, because they understand each other. And I think it's a very promising configuration. So our school is honestly is in a quite tight and dynamic conversation with Netflix, because thankfully Netflix is ready to to discuss this problem and maybe to do some new regulations and new ideas and the new new things about allowing young people to make their debuts on their platform. So we are full of hope, and I think that is extremely important platform of communication. So we are very disappointed from the one point of view, but I think there is a very important aspect, and we have to fight in a good meaning of this word for a better communication with them. I mean, we as a school and the young film directors who have a head full of dreams and want to make something new, let's call it like this.
Evet Kerem Hocam, siz devralmak ister misiniz yoksa?
Yo siz şey yapın zaten ben bir isterseniz siz çevirin, yani şey yapabilirsiniz, tercüme edebilirsiniz kısaca. Ondan sonra da toparlayalım. Hocaya da teşekkür edelim.
Evet, özetle bu platformların önemli olduğundan ve tabii ki de bu yeni nesil film yapımcılarının tanıtımında büyük rol oynadıklarından bahsetti ve özellikle kendi okulunun bu Netflix gibi platformlarla iletişimde olduğunu ve o iletişimin kopmaması gerektiğini, gelişmesi gerektiğine dikkat çekti. Çünkü film yapımcılığı anlamında tabii ki bütçe gerektiren bir şey ve bu bütçelerin sağlanması konusunda Netflix'le işbirliği içerisinde olduklarını ve bu platformların önemine işaret etti.
Evet. Türkiye'de de öyle durum zaten. Böyle bir durum var. Professor, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Take care of yourself. See you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All the very best for all of us. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Evet, 2. Uluslararası Yakın Doğu Üniversitesi Sinema Sempozyumu'nun açılışına yani ilk gün açılış konuğumuz Łódź Film yani da Łódź Film Okulu'ndan 2012 yılından beri rektörlüğünü veya okul direktörlüğünü yöneten Profesör Mariusz GRZEGORZEK'ti. Kendisine çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Bu dar zamanda bize zaman ayırıp bizimle bilgilerini paylaştı. O yüzden de kendisine teşekkür ediyorum ben. Herkese iyi çalışmalar, iyi günler, sağlıklı, mutlu ve barış dolu bir dünya diliyorum. Kendinize iyi bakın.
Bayanlar, baylar, Zafer sinemasında 2 film birden. Başrollerinde sinemanın bebek yüzlü aktörü Tarık Akan ve güzel gözlü yıldız Perihan Savaş. Esir Hayat. Kıbrıs'ta çekilen bu film aşk, mücadele, heyecan dolu. Kadınlara meccanen. Duyduk duymadık demeyin. Esir Hayat Zafer sinemasında.
Yakın Doğu Üniversitesi İletişim Araştırmaları Merkezi tarafından düzenlenen 2. Uluslararası Sinema Sempozyumu